Welcome to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast, the show where aspiring and experienced matchmakers come to sharpen their skills, grow their businesses, and elevate the matchmaking industry. Your host is ARLENE WASHBURN, an award-winning ethical matchmaking advocate, mentor, and industry innovator. Let's dive in.
Welcome back, friends. I am so glad you're here because today we're diving into a topic that many of us don't think about until we're forced to. Whether you're a matchmaker, a dater, or someone navigating the complexities of adult life, there's a high likelihood that you, at some point, you'll be faced with this question: what happens when our parents can no longer live independently? And what does that mean in our relationships, our dating lives, and the people that we match? So, my guest today is someone I have been so looking forward to speaking with. She's an incredible person, Pamela D. Wilson, an internationally recognized caregiver expert, advocate, and speaker. She's been doing this work for over 25 years, helping caregivers, families, and professionals understand the emotional, legal, and logistical landscape of caregiving. Today's conversation isn't just about caregiving, it's about love, empathy, and the reality of relationships when life gets complicated. Let's get into it. Hi, Pamela.
Hi, Arlene.
I'm so happy to have you here, Pamela. You have no idea. Because these conversations, I always invite people that I really want to learn from. And I found you, I don't know if it was LinkedIn or something else. And then I found you on LinkedIn and I was like, oh, I need to have this woman on my show. I think it was your YouTube, because I myself am going through this time in my life where I have a grandchild that I love spending time with and all that good stuff. And then I have a mom who just moved in with me early this year, who is just turned 93. And also, um, she was just diagnosed with onset of Alzheimer's, and it has been the most challenging time in my life, even more so than having a child.
Well, in a sense, you kind of have two children now.
Yeah, it's tough because children, I mean, I guess kids talk back, but they don't fight with you. They don't have narcissistic traits. There's a lot that's not there that you don't have to deal with. But before we dive into this whole conversation, I want to hear more about you. How did you first become passionate about supporting caregivers?
From a very young age, I spent a lot of time around older family members. So I was the youngest of 6 kids.
Wow.
So a lot of time with grandma and grandpa, aunts and uncles. And then when I went into high school, I had an interest in social work and helping people. I took a career detour for a number of years to go into marketing and consumer products companies. But then with the loss of my sister, 2 parents, and a brother, I kind of came back to what was it I was going to do to help people. And that's how I got back to this. And I've been doing it for 25 years.
That's amazing. It's really cool how often the thing that we think we want to do when we're young, and then, life gets in the way and you start doing a bunch of stuff. And when you have that moment to reflect and say, oh my gosh, what was that thing I wanted to do? You always go back there, right?
And it was a great place to go for me.
Yeah, no, and such important work, because it's something that most of us take for granted. Like I said in the beginning, if you're not even thinking, it's not on your radar. You have your parents, you have these tumultuous relationships, and good or bad, they're there, they're in a good place, etc. And then you don't think that someday they're going to get old and that they're not going to be able to be on their own and that you're going to have to take care of them, which truthfully I'm happy to do, because the idea of a nursing home, it seems like not a possibility, but you never know. What do you say about that? Because people often think that way, and then maybe things come up and they have to make other decisions.
Well, sometimes because it's hard to predict what's going to happen with the health of an aging parent, especially when they have dementia or Alzheimer's. That totally changes what you think you can do and then the reality of what you can do when their disease progresses. So a lot of adult children say, oh, I would never put my parents in a home. Sometimes it becomes the only practical thing to do. So there's no way to know until you are in the situation.
Yeah. And in your experience, what's the emotional toll that caregivers, what it takes to, like, you're this person who's you almost your identity, because I'm finding myself talking about it all the time. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to be that person who just talks about this thing all the time, but it's so front and center because it impacts everything. If I'm going to travel, if I'm going out, if I'm busy all day and I have to stop to make meals and all of that. I mean, you know this better than I do, but because I just started living this and it seems like a lot.
The emotional toll is extreme. So when I had my care management company, I was on call 24/7
Mm,
for 11 years. I would get calls at 3 a.m. I'd get calls at midnight. For caregivers, my recommendation is you got to find a way to take breaks and kind of compartmentalize the caregiving over here and then time for yourself over here. That's the only way, in my opinion, to survive this long term and not have it affect your health and your well being and your relationships and your work.
yeah, because if you're married and your spouse will say, "Hey, yeah, sure, bring your mom in," and then they're like, "Oh my God, I didn't know what I was signing up for," and it's not their parent, then you feel guilt. It's really really tough. And I was just speaking to a friend of mine recently who is a matchmaker. She's a pretty well known matchmaker, and I had heard her on her podcast talk about the trials and tribulations of. She's relatively young, but her mom had some medical issues and she requires a lot of care. And I don't know how this woman, I told her, I'm like, my hat's off to you because your situation is way worse than mine, having to help a parent go to the bathroom and do all the things. My mom is very healthy, thank God. It's just the personality. and
Well,
the,
but just wait. What your friend is doing will soon be or someday be your reality
yeah,
because people with dementia lose their ability to do self care and everything, feed themselves.
yeah. Wow. So when I saw you on YouTube, I'm like, I have to talk to this woman because I thought about how are people dating under these conditions? Imagine you have either an aging parent or a child that needs care forever, while you're alive because they're not self-sufficient. How do these people date? Like, what recommendations would you give to these folks?
You know, this is going to kind of sound crazy, but to date under these circumstances, you almost need a partner who understands or is familiar with what you're going through. So there are many caregiver support groups. Not that
Hmm.
I'm telling people to go there to find people to date, but let's say you have an autistic child and you meet somebody who has an autistic brother or sister, so they know what that's like. Or, your parent has dementia and you meet somebody and they're like, oh, my grandma had dementia. To make this work, you almost need some sense of, I call it caregiving commonality, because people on the outside who look in and they, hear the stresses of the caregiver saying, oh my God, I'm so tired, blah, blah, blah. Well, all they're saying is, well, yeah, of course you should take care of your parent. Of course you should do this. They have no idea what they're talking about because they're not living the day-to-day trials and tribulations that the caregiver is. So to make a relationship work, you need somebody who has some empathy or experience with what you're going through. Not that you want to talk about that all the time, but people who don't understand just don't understand.
That is so true because it's not just the understanding part, but the logistical part as well. Because they need to be aware that, same with single parents with young children where you have to make arrangements. You can't just pick up and go and be spontaneous. I'm in that situation now too. And it's not the same as having a dog or, it's just like a whole nother level. And my thing when I have conversations, for example, with my sister, who's maybe I don't know 30 minutes from where we live, and but my mom lives with me, and I'll get on the phone with her and I'll start to vent a little bit, and she immediately comes back with like, oh yeah, because she tries to relate, but what she does is talk about her situation, and I'm like, really? She doesn't live with you, you know what I'm saying? So even the family doesn't understand it, or you'll start to get suggestions like, oh, what do I do about, well, why don't you do this? So it's like, here, do some more work because you're not doing enough. I'm like, are you kidding me? Do not give me any advice that requires me to do another thing because I am drowning here.
I have a solution for that.
Oh, get awesome.
Take a week's vacation, invite your sister to come stay at your house and take care of your mom.
Yeah.
Then
Well,
she will have a full understanding of what you're going through.
let me tell you, you're thinking like me. I just went away for 15 days to France, and my mom stayed with my sister, and she managed to pawn her off for a week with someone else.
Oh,
That's how much it
well,
could.
that tells you that she couldn't do it.
Yeah, it's incredible. What other advice would you give people about how to navigate their life in the best possible way from a logistical standpoint? Because we have people running businesses and they're trying to do this at the same time, or taking care of children, even, or just wanting to date. Like, what are the logistical things that they can put in place and think about so that they have more freedom and a little bit more space to navigate all the different things in life?
The big logistical thing is having discussions early. And most people don't do this because they don't know to do it until it's much later on. But for example, talk within your family. Okay, if you have siblings or cousins or parents who are going to help, you have conversations with everybody saying, okay, I can do this. I can move mom or dad in with me under these circumstances, but I would like help from you on, you come over one day a week and give me a break so that I can go do this, so I can go, have my life, right? Or even with your parents saying, okay, you can move in, but we're going to have to evaluate this every 90 days, put this in writing. And if these things start to happen, then we may have to look at something else. So let's say you're running a business and you're single, right? And you're trying to date, but struggling with time. What happens when your parent is with dementia, is awake all night, and you're having to be awake all night with them? You can't work. You're not getting any sleep. You're run down. You don't have any time to date. So it's the early conversations that say, well, mom and dad, you can come live with me, but when this happens, when you're awake all night, or when you need more care than I can provide, we need alternate solutions. We either need to bring in caregivers if there's money to do that, or we may eventually have to consider you moving out of my home into a care community. So you kind of have to plan for the unknowns that happen. And it's hard to know what those are, but early conversations, putting things in writing is the best thing, because a lot of families have disagreements. When somebody moves a parent into their house, and the siblings are saying, well, it can't be that bad, or like, well, you agreed to do it, don't throw it back on us. Early conversations and transparency.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. It's almost like financial planning. It's like you're planning for the future, or retirement planning is having these conversations, which truthfully I never thought to have, because my mom, even now at 93, she looks so much younger, and she's very lucid. And then there are moments where you see what's happening, and the emotional toll is not just all the energy and effort that you have to put into it. It's also seeing someone decline in that
Mhm.
way. It makes it like sad at the same time. There's
It's very hard to watch a parent's health decline. And to your point, there's three prongs to this plan. So there's the health part, then there's financial, then there's also legal.
yeah,
So for parents, you want to make sure they have their estate plan done, whether it's medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney, their will, their living will, or a trust. Because again, if they get to the point where they can't make decisions, somebody has to do that for them.
yeah. I mean, fortunately, I have a power of attorney over everything to do with my mom for quite some time now, and have always been responsible for paying her bills and doing all her things. So this is just an add-on to everything else that I've been doing all along. What would be your advice if someone is dating and they want, this conversation comes up, and how should they present it when they're out there? You meet someone, you're like, oh, this is a great person. I would love to explore this relationship, but I have to talk about this thing because while it's not permanent in cases of parents, potentially, but if you have a child that has special needs, how do you even bring that up?
You have to bring it up in a way that you're trying to be considerate of the other person and say, look, I'm very interested in this relationship, but I want to let you know about part of my life that may interfere at times. So I have a child who's autistic, or I have an elderly parent with dementia and they're living with me and they may live with me for the next 10 years.
Wow.
Have you had, and then start asking questions like, have you had any experiences like this with your friend or in your family? Just to see if they have. If they haven't, in my opinion, that's kind of a red flag. People can be very compassionate and very empathetic, but when things start to happen, like you're at dinner and you get a call from your mom who's going to the emergency room and you have to leave your date at dinner. Or, one time my husband and I were at a movie. It was Friday night. It was our date night. I get a call from an attorney saying, oh, your client is halfway across town. I had to leave my husband at the movie theater. So there are points where something's going to happen and you want the person that you're dating to be considerate, or you hope that they would be. So you kind of have to set expectations and just talk about that to see if it's even something they're willing to deal with.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that. The other day, my husband and I were out, and during COVID, I bought my mom this thing called Portal. It's hooked up to a Facebook account so she can just touch the picture and go into a video call. And she was on a call with my sister, and it was late at night, and we were out, and all of a sudden I get this frantic call from my sister, and she says, Mom was just on Portal with me talking. She's just standing there, and all of a sudden she fell down. And I'm like, I'm out. Why are you calling me? Just like go see if she's okay. When I came home, her wrist looked terrible. I iced it. I then took her to the hospital. Now she has a broken wrist.
Oh.
And I'm like, how did that happen? She's literally standing in her room talking on this thing. But that scares the heck out of me because I'm like, what's happening here? Like, is this a further, deterioration where she can't even stand there and have a conversation? It's wild.
Well, you might have her evaluated, have a physical therapy evaluation done. Maybe she's starting to lose her balance or leg strength or muscle strength.
Yeah,
these things do happen with older people.
Yeah. Let's talk about resources. What support is available for people that are caregivers, whether it's, US, I'm imagining that you focus in the US, especially those who feel like they're doing it all and all alone and they just need help, especially, again, someone who's out there dating or who wants to date and doesn't have siblings to support. And even if you have siblings, sometimes they're not very
helpful.
very helpful. Which I know also creates bigger rifts when these situations come up in families, right? Because you feel like, hey, this is your mom too, come and help. But putting that aside, what resources are available?
So let's go back to having conversations about, is there money available to pay for care? So let's assume that there is. So resources would be a home care agency where you hire a non-medical caregiver to come in so that you can have the whole weekend off, or you can go on a date and you don't have to worry about mom falling and breaking her wrist and calling your sister, right? So if there's not money, there's a state program called Medicaid where you can get the same type of in-home care services. Sometimes not in the evenings if it's a Medicaid agency, but definitely on weekends to give caregivers a respite break. So that's one option. Another great resource is every county has an area agency on aging. If you just Google the name of your county and area agency on aging, this website will come up. And they have a lot of information and resources on there. So they may have grants where they provide what's called caregiver respite. So when I had my care agency, I actually got a grant for caregiver respite. And what that means is you're just giving a caregiver who has no money to pay for care a break. So my caregivers would go spend, 4 hours at Mrs. Smith's house on Saturday morning so that her son or her daughter could go, have lunch with a friend or go to a movie or go do something.
Yeah.
Other great resources are churches. So if anybody's connected to a church, you can ask for volunteers. And I'll give a real life example so that people don't think I'm crazy. But so I used to be a court appointed guardian, which was a legal role. And I was a guardian for a woman who lived in a very, very rural area where there were no services. So I went to a local church and I talked to the pastor and I said, here's what I need. I need 7 women. I need one to go see her every day of the week. And I found them. And they did that for 6 months until I was able to move her. It was amazing. So never think that you can't find help if you don't have money. You can. If you have money, it makes it a lot easier to pay for caregivers to come in.
Wow, you gave me goosebumps with that story because it's amazing how many people do come through. And having this experience myself, I would totally be one to at least volunteer one day, not because I want to continue to be in this space, but just knowing how hard it is on the person that's in that situation. Um, from a matchmaker's point of view, if typically people will come to you as a matchmaker because they're struggling with finding the right relationship because they're running companies, they have children every other week, or they just don't have the time, they don't want to go online. But I would imagine that maybe a caregiver would say, hey, I want to be in a relationship, I don't have time to be out there looking or online, let me go to a matchmaker. What questions should a matchmaker ask, and then to assess the situation with someone, but also to screen the matches that would be introduced to this person, if that makes sense?
So if I was, and I'm not a matchmaker, but let's pretend I am, okay? So if I was a matchmaker and I was interviewing a caregiver, my questions would be, well, who are you caring for? And what's the care situation? So, does your mom live with you? Does your mom live by herself? And about how many hours a week are you spending taking care of your mom? Is it every night of the week after you work? Is it all weekend? And then the other question really to ask is your life constantly interrupted by this, or is your caregiving time scheduled? So if it's scheduled, then matching somebody would be slightly easier because, they would be available on Friday night and Saturday and Sunday maybe. Where if a caregiver told me, oh my gosh, I'm taking care of my mom, and you know what? I get calls at 3 a.m. and on Sunday at 5 o'clock and, Saturday at noon. Then as the matchmaker, I would be thinking, okay, I need somebody who's like super flexible, maybe has kids themselves, has aging parents that they're taking care of, isn't going to freak out if, the caregiver or the person I'm trying to match tells them a crazy story about, mom with dementia getting in the car and driving 90 miles away and getting lost and she has to go get her. So it's kind of like the tolerance for unexpected things and how flexible and how adaptable somebody is that the person that you're trying to match.
That was gold that you just shared. And it's funny how after so many years in the industry and training matchmakers, I always get new information to incorporate into our process, because if you're a matchmaker working with someone who's 50 plus, or just in general, if somebody has children and you don't know what the situation is with those children, you really need to ask those questions, because in
Mm-hmm.
order for you to be effective and to be able to really serve them, or decide that you probably can't because maybe you don't have the dating pool that would be a fit for this individual, you need to ask those questions. So those are great questions. I'm going to write a blog about it and share it on my newsletter with everybody else. I'm going
Thank
to go back
you.
and listen to this episode and take notes, because every time I turn around, there's some new information that we need to be asking to really be able to support people. Um, wow. Okay. So what else would you share that you feel people need to know, that we haven't covered in this conversation, as a caution, or to really help them be able to navigate this in their lives, whether it's temporary or permanent? Any other advice that you can offer?
Yes. So when you're trying to match people, it would be, if I was doing this, it would be important for me to know how this caregiver that I'm trying to match copes with all of the stress.
Mm.
So some caregivers have a schedule. They're like, well, I go to the gym every day so that I can just, burn off all this anxiety, or, I meditate, or I do this or whatever, I walk my dog. Other caregivers don't have good coping mechanisms, right? So the people who have routines are probably a little more emotionally balanced, a little more calm when stuff happens, right? Then on the other hand, you've got caregivers that may not be a good match for anybody right now because their emotions are up and down and they're all over the place, and their phone rings and they're freaking out. Now, I'm not sure how a matchmaker would evaluate this, but you could certainly ask about coping mechanisms and dealing with stress, and give them a crazy scenario like, okay, it's 6 o'clock and you're on a date and your mom calls. Are you going to answer the phone, or are you going to text her and say, I'll call you later? So the question around that is, does this caregiver have a system for talking to their parent to say, you know what, I'm not available after 5 o'clock tonight. If you text me, it better be an emergency. I'll go take your call, but you can't text me to tell me that you can't figure out the TV remote, right? So you almost have to set boundaries with the parent that you're caring for to say, look, this is my time, right? Unless you've, fallen down the steps or you're having a heart attack or whatever, call 911 first and then call me. So you have to know whether the people you're trying to match have boundaries, or they've even set boundaries in their life, because boundary setting, even outside of caregiving, is a huge gap that I see for people in general, especially people that want to be helpful, caregivers.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're raised by a narcissist, chances are you don't have boundaries.
No, or anybody with a mental health problem. So there's this thing called ACEs. It's adverse childhood experiences. Excuse me. So any child who had parents who were not loving and considerate and kind and all of that probably don't have good relationships with their parent.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And that's going to affect so much.
Yeah, that's the challenge when you're in a situation like this. If you've had a difficult relationship, or it doesn't have to be overly difficult, but just some challenges. Now you have a situation like this where you're getting triggered left and right, because it's almost like you go back to being that teenager or that young kid who, it's a tough thing. And when there's dementia involved, that makes it even more challenging, because they also, I've noticed this with my mom, she gets on a loop. She has this cast that they put in the emergency room. We have an appointment to see an orthopedic surgeon. She keeps asking me about this. And it's like, I just have to tell myself, I know that she can't help it, but it's like a mental torture. So when are we going? Oh, I got dressed because I think we're going to go take this thing off. She just gets that idea in her head and there's no talking her out of it.
In those circumstances, what you can do is you can start a spiral notebook and write things down. And you can, so if your parent repeats questions, you can say, well, Mom and Dad, there's this notebook over there. Go look at the notebook and the answer's there. And so you write orthopedic appointment, Tuesday, 3:00, August 13th, which is 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So you kind of help them remember, or you give them tools to remember, because eventually, the recall is honestly at seconds, when memory loss gets so worse. And that's really hard on caregivers. And so caregivers then tend to lose their patience and think, oh my God, my mom's driving me crazy and all of that. But you can kind of early on find ways to work through it. Later on, you just redirect and you say, oh, you know what? The appointment's tomorrow. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. Try to change the subject to something else so that they get off the loop of, is it time for the doctor appointment? Is it time to eat? When are we going to do this?
Yeah. And I actually put a whiteboard in her room, and I put the information in, and her neurologist said she needs to get out of that room because she just wants to sit in her room, watch TV. She needs to be around other people. So my next move is going to be taking her to some place where she can play bingo or do something, because studies are coming out every day that sitting in a room by yourself just watching TV just
It's
makes the dementia get worse and worse.
So there are daycare programs. Have you heard of the adult daycare programs for
Oh,
people with dementia?
yeah. Oh, I didn't hear about dementia because it's so hard to tell that she has dementia until you hear her on a loop and or deny things that happen. But yeah, I know there's a program in my town. It's like at the Lions Club, and they meet there, the seniors, and they play bingo and do whatever. So I'm just gonna have to go with her because she doesn't. This is what my mom says to me. I'm like, Mom, it'd be fun for you to interact with other people, and it's important for your mental health and all this. And she's like, I don't want to have to go take care of old people because she thinks she's young. She's
Well,
93.
and they all say that. So like when I would have clients who were thinking about moving to assisted living, they're like, well, I don't want to go live with those old people. But what you find is, so it's kind of like if you have a child and you take them to school or daycare or whatever for the first time, they're screaming and they don't want to stay. And then they find out that it's okay. So there are actually full-time adult daycare programs from like 8:30 to 5, much like childcare programs for people with dementia. And you take them and they're in activities all day, right? And it may be really hard at first because they don't want to be there, but you would be surprised how quickly they would adjust. And then they're like happy being there.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's happening because I know my mom. The minute we try to take her wherever we go, so she's out of that room and hanging out and around other people. The minute she catches anyone's ear, oh my God, it's just talk. She talks their ear off, and I'm like, if only you would go hang out with some friends, you can talk all day instead of doing what you do. But it's so hard. I mean, I'm so grateful for this conversation because you're reinforcing a lot of things that I was already thinking about, setting up these systems. Because when you're new to caregiving, and I think a lot of people don't think about this, you don't know what you have to deal with. Like you said, I put a whiteboard in there so I don't have to keep answering the same question, even though I still do. Really doing some meditation and some breath work to cope with the stress when they argue with you. Like, I'll walk into a room. She gives me this look like, "How dare you?" And I'm like, "Are you okay?" She's like, "I haven't eaten anything all day." And I'm like, "Mom, you had this, this, and this." And she's like, "No, no, I didn't." And I'm like, "Oh,
You
okay,
can't, that's the thing, you can't argue.
okay. So let's talk about that a little bit. How to respond and react to? I don't like the word react, but how to respond to certain behaviors, especially because I love my mom and she was always a good person, but she was a total narcissist. There's no question. I mean, not all narcissists are bad people, right? Like, she wasn't a
Right.
malignant narcissist, but every conversation, everything leads to to her. Like, it's all about her. She wants compliments. She puts everybody down, etc. So, what's the best way to respond to them?
So my response to the haven't eaten all day would be, oh my gosh, Mom, I'm so sorry. Let's come and get you something to eat. What would you like?
Okay.
So you get nowhere with a person with memory loss by saying that's not true, right?
Okay.
So
Fair.
even like if your mom would come and say to you, I need to get home because Mom is waiting for me. Her mother's dead, right? You don't argue with it. You need to say, well, you do, but let's go do this first, and then I'll take you home to see your mother.
Okay.
So it's called confabulation, right? You never want to tell them that they're wrong because there's no point. I mean,
Mm,
what's the point? It doesn't matter.
yeah.
You have to get past the point of where you have to be right and they have to be wrong. So you kind of, unless it's harmful, you go with whatever they say. Oh, I'm so sorry you haven't eaten. Let's go get you something. What would you like? You just kind of work around it and you say, well, this is what we can do about this now. Let's go do it.
Yeah.
Give
So,
me some more examples and I'll give you more responses.
well, I mean, you just really brought back something that I already know, and should have considered? Because I think in some of your work that you talk about caregiving being about relationships. I think I read that somewhere.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, wait a second. I know this. If you're in a relationship with someone, it's not about being right or wrong. It's about getting to agreement. And I'm like, why didn't I think about this? Like, what's the point of trying to be right with my mom in this situation? Right. And I just think in general, when you interact with people and you have a relationship, the goal is to get to an agreement, even if you agree to disagree. And it's not about being right. If you walk into a conversation or even an argument about being right, it's just not going to go anywhere. And people get activated. So thank you for that reminder because I needed to hear that. I'm like, you know what? What was the word that you used? I love that.
Oh,
Conflate.
confabulation. It's kind of weird. It's like a half truth. It's like just so I'll give you another example. I had a caregiver who was taking care of this woman, and they're looking through photo albums. And the lady said, "Oh, and you were at my wedding." And the caregiver didn't say, because of course she didn't say, "Well, no, I wasn't." The caregiver was like, "Oh my God, and it was a beautiful wedding, and you and your husband, and it was just lovely." I mean, you just make it positive.
Hmm.
But it's hard when you're the child and you get triggered because your mom's telling you that you did something wrong, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, because she's overly critical, but and now I understand the behavior that needs to happen. Tell me about the work that you do and who are the kind of people that you work with.
So I talk to caregivers all over the United States and even some expats, so caregivers in other countries who have parents here. So I do one-on-one counseling, and I do
Oops.
I have to take care of my parent, but what do I do? So we talk about the health care, the financial, and the legal care. Talk a lot about situations like you and I are talking about. Caregivers like, "Oh my gosh, I never thought, I thought it would be 6 months and it's been 10 years. And I can't do this anymore. How do I get myself out of this?" So I help caregivers create what I call exit plans, much like an exit plan from a business owner, right?
Yep.
How do you get yourself out of this and still have care for your parent? Um, Talk a lot about, this is kind of an uncomfortable subject, but elder abuse and neglect. Because for people with Alzheimer's or dementia, when they have the diagnosis and they don't accept it, right? They
Mm-hmm.
can say, "Oh, no, I don't want help," or "I don't want your kids doing this." And then they're not bathing and they're not taking their medications and they're not doing all this stuff. That actually is self-neglect. And it's real elder care abuse and neglect. So how do caregivers deal with parents who should be doing things to take care of themselves, but they're refusing? Or let's say you have a sister that moved mom in with her, and that sister is spending all of mom's money. So I call it from the A to Z of caregiving situations and everything in between. How do you manage medical doctor appointments and hire caregivers and set boundaries with caregivers that you hire so that they don't feel like they're part of your family. They're there to do a job.
Wow.
So a little bit of everything. And then I do expert witness work for court cases, which is really litigation where maybe either a care agency or a community neglected a person's care and this person got hurt, or a bad guardian or conservator or power of attorney was hired. So I do work like that.
This topic must have really hit home with a lot of people. We have over 1,000 people watching right now. It went down a little bit, and I think it's because everybody deals with this at some point, whether you deal with it directly or maybe is your sibling doing it. And I'm sure there's some guilt, I would think, because I know if my mom were living with my sister, I would feel guilty that I'm not the one taking her in. So this is a subject that really, really hits home with so many people. That's,
Guilt is huge in caregiving.
oh yeah.
You know, And let's talk about, a person who's narcissistic or who had not so good a relationship when they were a child with a parent. Some of these children constantly feel guilty because they can't do enough. Their parents never happy. They brought the wrong brand of peanut butter home. Mom doesn't like the dinner. Dad's not happy. So you're this caregiver feeling guilty about I must be totally failing when really you're doing a good job, right? But you have to kind of get to a point where you're at peace with what you're doing and not try to be rewarded for making a parent happy, because you may never be able to do that depending on the situation. And that's what's really hard about all this emotional stuff. You have to be at peace with, hey, I'm doing a good job. I'm doing everything I can. I know that mom or dad isn't happy, but this is what I can do right now.
This conversation has been so amazing because you are reinforcing a lot of things in my mind. Because my mother feels that the food is no longer edible. Like, she loves fruits and vegetables, and every time I give her a fruit or a vegetable, this stuff is garbage. There's nothing but chemicals in here. It doesn't taste like it used to. And there's a complaint after complaint. If I try to help her with something, it turns into some weird argument about, I don't know. And it's like, oh my God, am I not doing enough? Like, I'm trying to help you. You don't even let me help you. And now I'm just realizing, you know what? Get over yourself, Arlene. It's not about you. This person has issues and you love them and you just want them to be okay. So just deal with it and let it roll off your shoulder, because it's almost not real, if that makes
Well,
sense.
it's not. You have to put dementia in this context of it's a brain injury, right? So you can't take it personally. That's really hard to do, right?
Yeah.
But whatever they're saying and whatever they're doing is because their brain is injured.
Yeah.
Normally they wouldn't do this, but their brain is injured. And so even on the food part, when people get older, they lose their sense of taste, and especially people with dementia. So then it's like maybe you take her in the refrigerator and say, well, pick, or find out what she likes to eat. And this is going to sound crazy too, but sometimes people with dementia love sweets. And we know it's really not good for them. But, if that's all they're going to eat is like cake, then make a cake and throw some protein powder in it or something. I mean, figure out ways to get nutrients in their food. If it's a milkshake, get some, protein powder and put it in the milkshake to disguise the flavor. And at least they're drinking and eating something, right? Which is better than nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, she's been pretty decent lately. I mean, just she'll eat whatever I give her, because if I say, "Mom, are you hungry?" Yeah, what? And I said, "Okay, well, do you know what you want to eat?" She's like, "Whatever you make is what I'll eat." So then it's like, okay, I have to make a decision about what I'm going to feed her. And now I've come to terms with, like, I'm just going to feed her whatever the heck I want to give her, and she can eat it. And
Well, and to stop asking questions is another tip. So
absolutely,
sometimes they don't know. So what you can say is, would you like A or B? When we would go out, so when I had my care agency, we would go and give people showers and dress and everything. And instead of saying, well, what do you want to wear today? We would say, well, hey, you can wear this outfit over here or this one. And then they would be able to pick, right? So they feel better about picking. You just have to give them choices rather than say, well, what do you want? Or what do you want to do today?
yeah. That's so funny. I did that with my daughter when she was, I don't know, 5 years old. She wanted to pick her own outfits. And so I was like, I know how I'm going to deal with this. I would put two outfits together, and in the morning I would say, which one do you like, this one or this one? And she gave me a look like, I know what you're doing, but she's like, that one. And that solved the problem. So
That will work today with your mother.
Pamela, thank you so much for this insightful conversation. I know our listeners, especially matchmakers and daters that are navigating these like personal challenges, are walking away with a whole new level of awareness. And for anyone who wants to learn more about Pamela's work, grab her book, The Caregiver Trap, or explore her support for caregivers of elderly parents course. Head over to PamelaDWilson.com. And if you're a matchmaker looking for better support for your clients through all of life's stages, including the often inevitable ones like caregiving, make sure you're part of our community. Visit lovepearlmastermind.com to access tools, training, and support from professionals who care about ethics and results. Until next time, keep making meaningful connections and don't forget to care for yourself too. Thank you.
Have you ever felt called to help others find love? You might have the heart for matchmaking, but without the right training, turning that passion into a thriving business can feel impossible. Most matchmaking courses give you outdated theories and a certificate, but no real world strategy to build a successful business. That's where Love Pro Mastermind Academy is different. Our live Done With You training goes beyond theory, helping you develop matchmaking expertise, implement sales and marketing strategies, and master the art of client success. With expert-led instruction, accountability, and a community of like-minded professionals, you'll learn how to identify your niche, attract high-quality clients, create a seamless matchmaking process, grow a sustainable, profitable business. With over a decade of experience, we don't just train matchmakers, we create leaders in the industry. Are you ready to become an LPMA certified matchmaker and build a business that changes lives? Apply today at lovepromastermind.com.
Thank you for tuning in to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow matchmakers and friends. For more resources, training, and inspiration, visit lovepromastermind.com and follow us on social media. Remember, matchmaking isn't just a career, it's a calling. Let's keep building connections, changing lives, and growing together. Until next time, stay inspired and keep matching.